All right, well, welcome back. Thank you, everyone. We are here on episode 4, Keys to the Deal, on our real estate masterclass. Again, my name is James Bradley. I'm a realtor with National Real Estate in Lexington, Kentucky, with my host, Andrew Wilson, realtor with National Real Estate and brokerage owner, and also our very special guest, home inspector with LexInspect, Brent Marcinek. Brent, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me with you all here today.
It's great to have somebody with your expertise to help us guide through this fun part that most people get involved with in the buying process, which is house hunting. And so certainly having a great real estate agent, which we talked about with our broker in the last episode, and making sure that you have your pre-approval letter ready to go to make those offers. You come through and you get to do the fun part of the process. So briefly, what we're going to cover today, we're going to go over wants and needs in your real estate search, definitely understanding the differences, which is critical. Then we're going to have Brent come in and talk about everything that inspectors see, and certainly what they look at versus what your real estate agent can legally do and look at, and where they're limited, and then how to tour like a pro. And then also taking all that information and understanding how it can be a deal breaker or leverage in your offer on a home. So starting off here with our wants and needs aspect of things. So when you're looking at purchasing a home and you sit down with your realtor and you look at what is negotiable in your mind, it really needs to be understanding where you fit in with what you have in your life. So if you have a family, schools are going to be extremely important. So that's something that's non-negotiable. You need to have the confidence of where you're sending your kids every single day and that they're getting the education that they deserve. And also to looking at it from the aspect of being in a great school district continues to add value, not only now, but in the future. Obviously, bedroom and bathroom counts are something that you can't really sacrifice. Your commute, right? So that's a quality of life aspect that you really want to make sure that you are honest about with yourself. And then there's also the nice to have elements, right? So whether you want a large backyard or you want certain types of finishings, maybe you want to have a basement, maybe a pool, whatever those things are, that's under the want category. And then of course it also can be contradictory to where you are with your budget. So you have to be honest with yourself and really understand what are my needs and what are my wants and how will they cross over to when you're making an offer on a home. So Andrew, as you go through and you talk with your buyers and you try to help them understand things, what is it that you convey to them about what can actually change within the home versus what you can't change?
Sure. A lot of times, what I'd like to tell the buyers up front, most of them are cognizant of the fact that location is definitely probably the most important factor for them. Perhaps it's style of home. Some people don't or feel comfortable with being, or they're not handy, or they don't have resources to, they don't know a painter, they don't know a quartz countertop guy, they don't know, somebody who can build a deck. That's kind of where I come in as a resource to alleviate any stress or concerns to the buyers. If you're looking for a home and it's the perfect location, but inside cosmetically it needs to be updated or changed, I'm trying to convey up front very quickly that paint is cheap, drywall is cheap. I have the resources and the people in my Rolodex phone book that says, hey, I can get a landscaper here tomorrow, or next week, or whatever it may be. So a lot of times it can even be a fun point, like a funny point to say, like, hey, that gigantic chandelier that was hung up there in 1992 needs to come down. Well, sure it does. And we can put up a modern fixture really easily. In this day and age, I think that people are more willing to do things like that, especially with Pinterest and, HGTV and all these different things. So a light renovation or a light cosmetic uplift is not out of the question for most buyers, especially if their real estate agent is resourceful and has those contacts to to refer. So things that you can't change is location and lot size. I mean, those property boundaries aren't changing. You can put up a fence though, if you want a little bit more privacy. Structural layout of the house is going to be a bit more expensive. So, what can you change about this house? I'll be able to use my resources to come in and say, hey, this is a load bearing wall or this is not. Can you finish the basement? Yes. What are the ceiling heights going to be? Things like that. School districts change, right? So you can't really guarantee somebody that they're going to be in a school district forever. But what you can do is with the information that you have at the time of purchase, or even if you know of any rumblings that a map might change, you could inform or disclose that to the potential buyer as well. And then neighborhood, I think that a lot of times people, they love this house, but the neighborhood's not exactly what they see themselves in. An example could be, there's no sidewalks, or, it's near a busy highway, or, they see their kids playing out in the backyard and it's not, maybe it has a giant slope or something. Those things you can't really change. Inside the home, the things that you can change, generally the light cosmetic work being, depending upon your taste, of course, don't end up being a large ticket item for a house that you want to stay in and enjoy for quite some time. But the lot size, location, school district, those things change less often than the light fixtures.
Absolutely. So you've gotten to the point now where you found the perfect home. Everything feels fantastic. You've toured it. Everybody's happy, and you've put in an offer and it's accepted. And now you get to meet everybody's favorite person, and that is the home inspector. So here now, we're going to have Brent walk us through really what he evaluates when he comes in to do his home inspection.
Yeah. So when I'm actually showing up to do the inspection, my aspect of the way that I handle it is, I pull up on the property, take a look at the house from just the exterior, just as I first pull up, right? From that point, I kind of make my way on into just walking the exterior, and I'm going to do that. So walk the outside of the house. I'm going to do that. My first go around, take a look at kind of the foundation, if I can see it from that point. So I'm going to take a look at the foundation. As long as it's not covered up by like brick veneer over that, we're going to see if there's any type of cracking on the exterior, essentially. If all that checks out, I'm going to make my way around again, and then I'm going to start looking at the siding or the cladding, depending upon what type of material is used there, from brick veneer to vinyl siding. Take a look at that, see if I'm seeing any issues with it from that standpoint. Continue on around the next time. I'm going to start looking at the gutters and the roof. Essentially, that's where I kind of put those together. And this is not the full roof aspect. This is just the first shot, kind of getting my basis of looking up the roof line and seeing if anything's standing out right away from there. Continuing as I go back through, I'm going to start looking at how the ground's laying. Do we have negative grade? Is negative grade coming towards the house with the gutters coming down? Obviously, going to look and see if those are just dispersing right next to the foundation wall, because all that matters. Water can affect the home in a lot of different ways. But after I do the whole exterior, and that includes, front porches, decks, electrical outlets, all that on the outside, I kind of make my way into the inside of the house. For me, on the way that I handle this is I start going room to room, essentially, inside the house. So when I get into the house, I usually start at the kitchen, where we have wet area is kind of what I call it. And just going to do a once over on the walls, the ceilings. We're going to look at the electrical outlets in those areas, light switches, ceiling fans, lighting in general, countertops, cabinets. But the bigger point in on that area is we're going to open up the cabinets underneath the sinks, make sure that we don't have any plumbing issues in those particular areas. And that's going to coincide, kind of for when I'm going into the bathrooms as well. We're going to run all the plumbing fixtures, check that, make sure we're not getting any leaks underneath any of the vanities, but also that we're not having any issues with the actual shower and or bathtub at that point as well. After we get kind of done with the, going room by room on that, then we're going to start hitting those main areas. So, for instance, when we're getting into the attic, I'm going to get into the attic, and I'm going to be checking the structure of the attic first and foremost, as I go through there. Also going to be checking insulation levels, making sure that we have insulation kind of throughout the entirety of the attic space that I can see, but also going to be checking the ventilation. So making sure that we're getting the proper ventilation in the attic space is going to be a key component of that as well. With the electrical side of things, obviously, as I go through room to room and I'm making my way through, I'm going to check the outlets and make sure that we have GFCIs anywhere we're near a wet area, so from a sink or anything like that. But when we get to the panel itself, so into the electrical panel, I'm going to remove that and I'm going to take a look, and then I'm going to start checking on essentially the wiring going to the breakers. And then also, you got the entry coming into the house from a masthead to underground service, all that. But in the panel itself, I'm going to be going through in a line item of all the breakers and making sure that the wiring matches what amperage the breaker is to it. And that's where you can kind of start to see if we have, unprofessional wiring or if we have double taps. There's a lot to uncover underneath the panel cover, essentially. But at some point in times, you can just you can look at a panel and tell that it's not a panel we want to see, essentially, as well.
And hold that thought as we get deeper into the electrical. But I wanted to start at the top here, really with the roof and the HVAC system.
Yeah.
Roof age and condition, it affects insurance rates, financing approval, and the negotiating power of the buyer. What HVAC lifespans, probably 15, 20 years old, and they can get very expensive. But I wanted to ask, what is the most expensive HVAC or roof surprise that you found in a home that maybe looked completely fine on the surface?
Roof surprise is definitely, generally some sort of leak where it ends up coming into the interior, right? So, for instance, on the roof, like I said, with the gutters, I kind of tie those together. And in a lot of homes, and even in some of the new construction, we have areas where we don't have proper flashing. And when we're not getting that proper flashing, so, kick out flashing or just the correct flashing in general, we're getting moisture intrusion that's not only coming into the home, but it's actually going down a wall and getting behind the wall. And those aren't always the easiest to find, and sometimes you don't find them until much later where we have bigger issues. But catching items like that to where, we're doing a non-invasive inspection. So, 9 times out of 10, I'm just using a moisture meter to try to pick up on moisture, and finding that behind a wall where from the outside, I was just looking and seeing that we had missing flashing. Then it opens up a big can of worms, because now we have roof repairs, but we also have interior walls that need to be repaired on that. With the HVAC side of it, a lot of the times it's going to be those older units. Those older units is where you start to come into issues. Big surprises a lot of the times is going to be with a furnace where you're falling into some safety concern aspect where the burner's not running right, and you have that chance of having carbon monoxide being pushed into the house. More of a scary aspect opposed to a extremely costly, but HVACs are at the top, at the top of the list for things that are expensive to be done.
Right.
That makes sense. All right. I think that's all I got on it. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's
there.
great.
Yeah,
that's great to know. You're absolutely right. I mean, because like I was saying too earlier about insurability, especially with the roof, it does become such a flashpoint during the negotiation process, and really understanding what the quality of the roof is, and how much longer somebody's going to be able to get usage out of that. And then the HVAC systems. I mean, certainly in Kentucky over the last 2 years, we've had ice storms, and it gets very hot here and during the summer. So making sure you have a system that's going to give you at least a few good more years if it's a used home is really important. And then coming back to the electrical systems, if you want to talk a little bit about outdated panels, which is always a point of interest for me, and also to how often do you find something in plumbing or electrical that maybe the seller already knew about but didn't necessarily divulge?
Well, getting into the divulging part of it, I can't really go too far with it because I don't always see that information, period.
Right.
But on the electrical side, yeah, when we're talking about outdated electrical panels, so there's a handful of them, but probably the two most common are the Federal Pacific and the Zensco. The Federal Pacific stab lock breaker or electrical panel, both of these panels are more known for the fact that essentially the breakers don't trip. Therefore, they end up welding themselves to the actual bus bar, and then they won't actually trip. So you're sending power when we shouldn't be getting power anymore. So there was a fault in the system, and then it comes back, and that's why breakers trip, essentially. And when they're not going to trip, now we got the possibility of having a fire hazard and safety concern. Both these panels are well known for that, and that's why they become a bigger issue, not just on my standpoint or by an electrician standpoint, but obviously insurance is well aware of these now. So, that can be something that could be brought up at a later date as you're trying to get to the closing table or so on. One that coincides between electrical and plumbing that I see a lot is obviously with the galvanized piping, people end up starting to see issues with reduced flow through the pressure, essentially, with the home. So they'll kind of go through and then they'll change out what's visible. So let's just say if it's in a crawl space, they'll go through and they'll change out the plumbing to, now the newer one that most people are going to do, and they may even attempt it as a handyman aspect of it, is going to be PEX. The problem that ties back to electrical that I see a lot with that is the grounding of the electrical system. They are not grounding it back to the so especially with those older panels, the electrical panel was also grounded to the plumbing lines because it was a metal. They would use it as a grounding rod, essentially going back through the earth. And what I'm seeing a lot is that when they update the plumbing, they're not updating the grounding, and therefore even if it's a newer electrical panel, but they have older plumbing, it's not going to be grounded right because it's going to a product that can't conduct the ground back into the system. Galvanized pipes in general, like I brought up the reduced flow in it. But what I see a lot with that and why that becomes an issue is obviously the internal corrosion is what reduces the flow. But also when you take dissimilar metals and you combine them, then you have a higher rate of corrosion at those, which means corrosion is you're going to have a higher rate of leaks, essentially. With corrosion on plumbing, the way that I explain it is if we get a cut, right, we're going to start bleeding. And as our body tries to heal itself, we begin to get a scab. Essentially with plumbing, it's just the same thing. If a pipe has a small, it could be a pinhole leak, it will begin to corrode. And that's that plumbing trying to heal itself from the outside going back in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And then getting down and dirty, what's beneath the surface? Talking, I love going into the foundation and really looking at that. My dad is a contractor, has been for 40 years, and in high school I remember having a lot of conversations about older foundations because I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, so we had a lot of earthquakes. So foundation issues were very frequent. Can you walk us through a little bit on what is a cosmetic issue with a foundation versus something that is maybe a deal breaker, something that's much more serious on the foundation? And then also too, are there anything that buyers consistently overlook that genuinely surprises you after all your years of experience?
On the buyers overlooking, in general, I think most buyers overlook the crawl space and what it entails, essentially. The crawl space in general is a, dark, wet, damp area in most of the homes, especially around here. Now, a lot of homes are, being improved and putting in good vapor barriers and all of that. But when we're looking at older homes, a lot of the times, even if there was a vapor barrier installed in there, it's either been moved when the HVAC got changed out. Now we're back to the soil, or the age of it, it's just beginning to deteriorate because it wasn't, the correct thickness from the right off. When it comes to the crawl space, I think one of the biggest telltale signs, and, with a potential buyer or at the time, one of the biggest things you can do is just, you don't have to get down in the crawl space, but if you open up the crawl space access and you look in there and there is insulation that is just hanging from the floor joist, hanging down, falling apart, you're going to have high levels of moisture in that crawl space no matter what. That is, the insulation is basically holding onto that moisture and it's just pulling down. And when we have that high of levels of moisture, that's when we're going to start running into issues with cracking and, fungal-like growth on the wood surfaces. And when you have that level of moisture, then you're going to start to potentially have the structure as a whole wanting to kind of give way because it's holding moisture. So it begins to sag down a little bit there. If you're digging into the cracking aspect, obviously, horizontal cracking is by far one of the more important ones because that's essentially showing that we have so much pressure up against the foundation wall with that hydrostatic pressure. It's actually causing it to bow inwards, and that is what's showing that horizontal crack. You have stair step cracks as well, but for me, the next one behind the horizontal crack is cracking with offsets. Basically meaning that if you were to run your hand across the foundation wall and your hand gets caught, or I carry an iPad when I do a home inspection, if I'm taking my iPad and I run it across the foundation wall and it stops it, then it's showing me that we have quite a bit of deflection on that and that obviously there's some movement going on there.
Yeah. Okay, Brent. So knowing everything you just walked us through, what should buyers be doing themselves during a showing before you ever come into the house to do your job?
Yeah. When you get to the home and you're walking up to it, the biggest point is check the grading of the home. Make sure that grading, so by the earth being sloped towards the home, that, and flat grading can be that too. But when we're talking about the homes that, sometimes are built side by side, we may have a flat area or we may have a negative grade coming towards the back of the home. That is a big one for sure, because that affects, once again, back to the water, can affect the foundation in the long term. It doesn't mean that it'll happen right away. But kind of going all back to water as well, gutters and roof. If you get far enough out, you can kind of see the roof line, but you also want to see the gutters. If you're looking at the gutters and they're not sloped correctly, then they're going to be dumping water right back on the foundation and or the house. And sometimes if you just walk up to the house, you can see splash marks from where the water's hit the ground so long it's actually splashed back up against the house. That's a big one as well. As you're walking around, if you can visually see any of the foundation walls, you're going to want to check for cracking, because if you're seeing a crack in the foundation wall and then say it's a brick veneer home and you're starting to see a crack come off of that foundation wall and then go up through the brick veneer, that's a good indication that we may have some issues there right off. But, settling, plumbing as well, depending on the age of the home, there's, you're going to run into the likelihood of having galvanized piping. So simply just opening up the cabinet doors and checking out underneath the cabinet doors, you can see if you have galvanized water supply, but you can also see if you have cast iron or galvanized, possibly underneath the sink as well, where it goes through the wall.
Yeah. One thing that I think is always a red flag is when your nose picks up on something. So when you walk in and that's a signal, what is it that people are typically smelling if there's a mustiness to it?
So it can be a couple different things. Going to the musky smell, we could have high levels of moisture in the crawl space, and that's making its way up through. Especially if the home isn't, if we don't have that vapor barrier down, that's not going to, the preventative aspect of it going out in a different route. So it can definitely be moisture. There's times that it can be fungal growth as well, too. That can put off a bunch of different smells, but musky is also one of them there. And it can also be plumbing. That musky smell can come from if a house has been sitting vacant for a very long time, and let's just say it's an older home and it has S traps underneath the sink instead of P traps. Those will siphon themselves out and you won't have that water gap. So there's times that you can have those sewer gases kind of make their way up through, especially in the laundry area where your washing machine is going to drain down into that. Sometimes that won't have the proper trap on it. And if it hasn't been used in a very long time, that can cause that smell as well.
So many different things just from a smell. So I just wanted to provide our viewers just with a quick checklist of things here, a little bit over what you went over, just looking at the roof from the street. Maybe you're sitting in your car for a few minutes observing the neighborhood, just gives you a moment, a single frame of reference, gives you the opportunity to look at things that are stationary right there on the property. As Brent mentioned, you come in, look at the plumbing, open up every cabinet. If you're there and you're taking your time seriously considering it, go ahead and do that. Check the ceilings for water stains. Note the smells as you come in and move throughout, and then test some doors and windows. These are just simple things that you can do as the buyer before you get into that process and you just start to really make a concrete decision on whether or not this property is for you. So now, we've come to the point where you get your report back from Brent, and the question that every buyer has after the inspection, and most of them don't know how to answer it. So what are we looking at when we get our report? And I want to lay it out for both of you to give the audience and a prospective home buyer, what is something that you really look at and say, look, this is going to be extraordinarily expensive. You may need to walk away from this one, or what's negotiable? What can we get back in, maybe a price reduction, a credit, or some repairs? What do you guys think here?
So for me, on my end of it, I always have to look at it as everything can be fixed, right? It's only a matter of how the buyer wants to handle it. So if I'm breaking down my report, and let's just say on my further evaluation items, we have, a foundation issue. What I'm going to tell my client at that time is, hey, at the end of the day, you have to get a contractor out here first and foremost, just to see what the price point is going to be. If you get that price point and it's not a matter of can you negotiate it or not, it's just a matter of, does that sit well with you? Are you going to be happy with that when it's all said and done? So I think that's one of the bigger ones for me is just, you got to take that report and then go get the right people there. There's obviously been times where people have walked away just immediately after. And I think that's usually going to be if, items that are further evaluation items just keep on piling up, essentially.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of piggyback off that and just state that, from the process of the realtor, and once we decide that, the buyer decides, hey, I want to put an offer on this house, go through negotiations to get it accepted. My first call is going to be to Brent. And Brent's going to go in and inspect the house, and we're going to have this report back that's going to be pretty itemized and laid out in a readable manner of the walk away things. It might not be listed that way, but there's going to be is it economically viable to proceed here? Let's just not even go to the negotiation table yet. Do you still want to proceed with the house? And I think that, as is listed, the active structural failures, extensive mold, and foundation issues, those are obviously all going to be quite expensive, or can be quite expensive. Anything that can be negotiated outside of cosmetic issues, right? You're going to be able to probably speak logically as the agent to the agent on the other side as to how to come to an agreement on how these repairs get fixed. So after, Brent has gone through, he mentioned vendors. A good real estate agent is going to have somebody, and even Brent in his report, he has vendors listed as, hey, if you don't have somebody, I've got somebody for this, and this. So if I need to call an electrician, I'm calling them. If I need to call a roofer, I'm calling them. And a plumber, I'm calling them. Foundation specialists, things like that. So we can get actually a dollar amount quote to see, is it going to be worth to proceed through these negotiations, or do we want to, just pack it in and walk away and look for a house with maybe not as many issues. Brent had mentioned earlier, everything's fixable, and that's completely true. Now, the threshold of either pain tolerance or most likely fear from the buyer, regardless of if it's rational or not, I think that's where the conversation comes in is, hey, we can fix this. This is a $1,500 problem, not a $15,000 problem, and then once that's established, if the buyer does have the desire to go through to the negotiation, that's when the real estate agent comes back in armed with, the inspection report, armed with quotes and things to put, I guess, more of a definition behind the issues. And a lot of times, the agent on the other side is, hey, do you have a picture of this? Well, yeah, sure we do, because Brent took a picture of it, and then the roofer took a picture of it, and then Andrew took a picture of it. And so here's a couple different angles, and this is the problem. There's the leak is here, and the drywall damage is here, etc. And that way you're giving a full picture to an issue that, even if it wasn't disclosed, may not have been known by the seller, because the sellers they're not spending time in their crawl space. There could be an issue that they did not know about. Now, another thing that I do want to say is that on the seller's disclosure, if it is listed on the disclosure, it is not to be asked for on the repair. I guess technically you could, but when you make that offer and you've signed off on that seller disclosure, you're making an offer on the house as you see it, not as a professional home inspector, not as a professional roofer, plumber, electrician, etc. But having known a defect that exists, you still need to incorporate that into your offer. Hey, the HVAC is 28 years old. Well, I'm from the camp that if it ain't broke, don't break it. I would budget, for repair or for replacement, in fact, for an HVAC in your submitted offer, and keep some money to the side to make that happen. However, I've seen HVACs that are, 28 years old that last a lot longer than that. So it all depends. Buyer, let me see, how should I say this? The buyer's threshold of knowledge and discomfort, or the ability to have things fixed, is crucial to understand from the agent's perspective when going into negotiations.
Absolutely. And as we use the inspection report going into negotiations, I want to say, it's not the goal of the report is not to find reasons to walk away. It's also not a to-do list.
Right.
It's there to give us a documentation of the issues that we don't already know. And then the real estate agent is there to help leverage those issues to pay the price for the property that's right. Because ultimately you don't want to overpay for something. And the seller doesn't want to be underpaid for what it is. So it's getting to the point where each party feels like this is acceptable based upon the conditions of everything that one is paying for at a fair market value. So yeah, I mean, that's where we have the inspection report and why we have it, to give the buyers, to give the consumer all the information that they need to be able to move forward in their transaction. Just a couple of key takeaways, and Brett, if you wanna sum everything up in some way here, everything that you had, if there any parting information you want to give our viewers, the floor is yours.
Yeah, obviously we talked about, kind of when you're getting there, when you're going to see the house for the first time and everything like that. Take a look at some of those key items of just, doing a once over by yourself. Take note of, are you feeling a lot of sloping in the floor and stuff like that? Are the doors opening and closing right? Those are all big things that, can make it so that you're not stunned when you get the inspection report. Just having that knowledge, knowing that the HVAC is 26 years old or something like that. These are all key things that can just help you be able to have that information prior to waiting for the inspection report or submitting an offer and being out money, because now you've gotten, you've had me out there, you got an appraiser going, say you got a termite guy there. All of these things, they all add up. And, my job is to come in as, an unbiased person with no blinders on, and to find as many things as I possibly can while I'm there so that you have all that information. So I am there to find things. My job is to find things. So whatever you can do in the beginning to make it so that you have an idea of what may be coming.
Well, thank you guys. We're at the end of our presentation here. I want to thank Brett and Andrew for joining us. And next time on the last episode of Buying a Home, we're in the final home stretch, getting to the closing table, and there's a lot that happens that buyers don't know about there. So definitely subscribe and be on alert for that one. That'll be coming pretty soon. Again, Brent, thank you so much. He is the home inspector with LexInspect, and Andrew Wilson, the owner of National Real Estate and Realtor. Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
And we will also have everybody's contact information. It's on the screen here, but it'll be down below in the description here on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Guys.
Thank you.